Welcome to my channel. In the dead of night, the mission was declared lost. Fog swallowed the mountain, comms went silent, and 7 soldiers vanished without a trace. But one name still whispered through the static: Ghosthawk. What followed was a relentless, one-woman hunt through enemy territory, turning a doomed operation into a legendary rescue the military will never forget. They told us it was over at 4:12. Mission failed. Immediate extraction for all units. Those exact words over the comms, flat and final, like the slam of a coffin lid. The order came just as the fog rolled in, dense enough to swallow the entire mountain range, thick enough that even the air felt like it was holding its breath. One by one, the signals from our people went dark. No pings, no responses. Just dead air. We thought we'd lost them all. Then, static. Faint at first, the kind that makes you wonder if your own mind is inventing it. But it grew, crackling until a voice cut through, raspy but steady. Ghosthawk reporting. Target neutralized. Repeat, target down. It froze the whole command tent. Ghosthawk. That was my call sign. I wasn't supposed to still be out there. According to the roster, I was just a logistics officer, Captain Raina Morgan, the woman who made sure the frontline boys had full mags and fresh medkits. Paperwork and pallet drops. Not the tip of the spear, but I hadn't always been a quartermaster. Years earlier, I'd run with the covert recon outfit known, unofficially, as Nightglass Unit 3. We worked in the shadows so deep you started forgetting sunlight existed. Then came that mission in eastern Anatolia, the one that killed my whole team and left me with a chest full of ghosts. After that, I begged to be reassigned. No more sneaking through enemy backyards. No more staring down rifle barrels with no backup in reach. I wanted the quiet, the rear line work, the safety of being invisible. And I got it, right up until Black Spire happened. Black Spire wasn't the kind of mountain range you just wandered into. Razorback ridges, caves that seemed to breathe, weather that could swing from blinding sun to snowstorm in minutes. We'd gone in under the cover of darkness to cut the head off a separatist strike force. 25 of them dug in tight, with enough firepower to punch holes in an armored column. My job was supposed to be simple. Resupply Bravo Team 2 halfway through their advance. Drop off ammo, collect wounded, get the hell out. But the separatists knew we were coming. They didn't just hit us, they folded in on us. Perfect timing. Every angle covered. Somebody had fed them our playbook. Radios went to static. GPS blinked out. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet as the fog rolled off the peaks. Within minutes, I was alone. Couldn't see the men I'd been walking beside seconds earlier. Couldn't hear anything but the distant thump of gunfire and the muffled cracks of rifles inside the wideout. Command picked up fragments. Explosions. Half sentences from panicked voices before cutting to silence. Drones swept the area but saw nothing, just white and shadow. Thermal showed faint shapes cooling fast in the snow. By 4:12, 8 hours after the last coherent contact, they called it. Mission failed. Pull everyone out. 7 missing. Presumed dead. I was one of them. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. And the thing about being the last one left from a ghost unit? You don't stop just because somebody at a desk says it's over. You stop when the job's done. While the base camp started drafting casualty lists and prepping memorials, I was already moving deeper into Black Spire, every step pulling me closer to the men who'd taken my team. I wasn't retreating. I was hunting. I'd learned patience in Nightglass, patience and the value of vanishing, staying in place until the opportunity was perfect, reading terrain like a second language, knowing when to strike so fast it felt like you'd always been there. That night, all of it came back. The part of me I'd locked away, and I had no intention of calling in until every single one of them was down. 2 hours after they'd called it over, something twitched on the recon drone feed. At first it looked like nothing, a pale smear on a gray landscape. Then the lens sharpened, caught the image mid-sway. A separatist fighter face down in the snow, a single entry hole clean between the eyes. No scatter of brass. No burn marks from a close fight. Just one round, placed exactly where it needed to be. That's not how chaos looks. That's how training looks. 30 minutes later, the drone banked over a jagged outcrop and caught the glint of paper wedged under a rock ledge. The recovery boys hiked up there, thinking they'd find a scrap of wind-blown junk. Instead, They pulled out a laminated tactical map marked with precise, deliberate notes, routes, watch positions, supply trails. The handwriting was tight, squared off, identical to my old logistics reports. An hour after that, one of their jammers went down. Not blown up, not stripped for scrap. Methodically opened, each board and cable removed in the right order like a surgeon laying out instruments. You don't learn that in basic. You learn that in places the military pretends don't exist. Then, at 9:21, a signal lit up on a dead frequency, one of the old night glass bands we'd buried years ago. It was only a 30-second burst, encrypted, then gone. But the call tag stamped on it, GH-17, landed in the command tent like a sucker punch. Ghosthawk, still breathing, still transmitting. Colonel Pratt, who'd been leaning on his elbows half asleep since the extraction order, straightened so fast his chair almost went over. Pull her full file, he told Intel. Not the quartermaster one. Everything. They dug deep, deeper than most of the kids in that tent had clearance for, and the Real file came up. Recon medals that didn't officially exist. A casualty report stamped sealed. Photos of me with the old night glass crew, all but my face blurred for classification. And at the bottom, a line that read, single surviving member of Unit 3, Operation Coldvale. Recommend reassignment to non-combat role. Pratt read it twice, then looked up. If Ghosthawk's still active, he said quietly, then the mission isn't over. They stopped the casualty reports cold, sent more drones, tuned every spare radio to every ancient night glass frequency in the archives, and they started watching the mountain like hawks, no pun intended, because if I was up there, I wasn't done. At 10:15, they caught another signal. Not to them, a field log for my own records. Voice dry as kindling, but steady. Day 1, post-ambush. 7 enemy down. 2 friendlies located. Extraction impossible at present. Beginning solo elimination protocol. They didn't need to guess who it was. You can fake call signs. You can't fake the tone of someone who's already committed to going the distance. Pratt leaned over the comms desk and told them flat. We don't chase her. We support her. She's not lost. She's point man now. It was the first time they'd ever said that about one person walking alone into 25 armed fighters. But they were right. In Night Glass, we were taught one thing above all. When the playbook burns, the one still breathing writes the new one. And I was already writing mine in the snow. The thing about hunting in the mountains is that it's less about speed and more about rhythm. You don't hammer your way through. You breathe with the place, move when it moves. That first night after the ambush, I didn't waste a single round. I mapped. I counted. I listened. I wanted to know how the separatists walked when they ate, which ones were loud talkers, and which ones kept their eyes moving. By sunrise, I had the start of a map scratched into my memory, every patrol route plotted like clock hands. The first strike was almost lazy. A sentry broke off from his patrol to take a smoke behind a boulder. I let him finish half of it. I've never been in a rush to kill someone who doesn't know they're already dead. One suppressed shot to the base of the skull, body eased down so gently it never touched the snow hard enough to leave a crash mark. I pulled the magazine from his rifle, palmed 2 grenades from his belt, and left him looking like he'd simply gone to sleep mid-shift. Back in my old night glass days, we called that opening the board. You don't go for checkmate first. You remove the right pieces so the rest of the game falls into your hands. By midday, I'd hit 2 more, 1 sniper position, 1 forward scout. Always clean, always quiet. I could feel the shift already. Their comm chatter had an edge to it now. The kind that says they know something's wrong, but can't find the shape of it. I spent the next 12 hours circling the ridgeline, pulling intel from whatever I could touch. A drop map here, a half-burn note there. I raided their supply point in the southern gulch, stripped out every medkit, replaced their drinking water with a mix that would keep them busy on the latrine instead of the firing line. Command kept picking up traces, a short burst on the deadband here, a jammed frequency flicker there. Every time they flagged it, I could imagine Colonel Pratt standing over the analyst's shoulder saying, "That's her. She's working." They weren't wrong. Near sundown, I spotted movement, not theirs. A glint in the canyon mouth, low to the snowline. I dropped behind a rock shelf, glassed it. 2 of our own. Bravo 2 survivors. 1 crawling, 1 dragging the other with what looked like a shattered leg. They were 20 yards from an enemy outpost and didn't even know it. The old me, The rear echelon me might have called it in and prayed someone could get to them. But Nightglass doesn't pray for rescues. We make them. I ghosted down the slope, cutting across their line just ahead of the enemy's watchpoint. A quick flick of the knife into the outpost guard's throat, another through the side to make sure he stayed quiet. I pulled his body into a snow hollow and got my boys moving before the rest even noticed he'd missed his check-in. They were half dead already. Frostbite in the fingers, faces drawn tight against the cold. But when I told them, "Follow me and keep your mouth shut," they did exactly that. I put them in a narrow crevasse I'd scouted earlier, covered the opening with a sheet of rock-colored tarp I'd lifted from enemy gear, and gave them a packet of rations each. I told them I'd be back when it was clear. The look on their faces said they weren't sure if I meant a few hours or a few days. Truth was, I didn't know either. Because right then, the only thing I was sure of was this: the board was open, and I'd just started playing. Command must have been chewing nails by that point. Every few hours they were catching another irregularity on the feeds, an unexplained blackout on an enemy comms tower, a patrol that didn't report back, heat signatures vanishing mid-route. They weren't seeing firefights. They were seeing absence. And absence was my handwriting. By the time the second night fell, I had 3 survivors tucked away in separate hide sites, each one invisible unless you knew exactly which way to look. I'd scavenged 2 rifles, a half crate of ammo, and a satchel of field rations from enemy caches. Every item got redistributed, none of it in my own pack. I wasn't hoarding, I was laying a trail. When I was with Nightglass, we called them breadcrumbs. Little signposts for the people you wanted to find you, without ever telling your enemies where you'd been. A length of paracord wrapped twice around a pine trunk. A mess tin left upside down at the edge of a ravine. Gear arranged wrong on purpose, so anyone trained would see the human hand in it. Pratt's analysts must have been reading my trail like an open book. I wanted them to, because if they knew where I'd been, they could start guessing where I was going. Meanwhile, the separatists were chewing themselves up trying to figure out who was hitting them. One of my favorite tricks back in the day was to use their own paranoia as a weapon. Hit one guard post, then leave a set of prints heading toward another, but never actually go there. They'd overstaff that point, strip another thin, and suddenly their defense line would be limping. I used the mountains themselves as cover. If you've never been in a whiteout at altitude, you can't appreciate what it does to your head. Shadows shift in the fog. Sound carries wrong. You'll hear a twig snap 100 yards away and swear it's right behind you. That's when I'd move in. No gunfire, just the whisper of a blade or the muffled thump of a garrote line going tight. One by one, their sentries stopped coming back. One by one, their patrol rotations got shorter, more frantic. By 3:40 on the third day, I had all 5 survivors stashed and stable. One of them a corporal named Drew who was keeping notes like he was writing my biography. Moves like smoke, he scribbled on a scrap of packaging I'd given him. Never says more than 2 words unless she has to. I almost laughed when I saw it. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too kind. Smoke is something you see. I was trying to be something you don't. By dawn, I was back out on the ridges, watching them tear their own defenses apart over a ghost they couldn't catch. The next move would be bigger. Messier. Something they couldn't ignore. Because sometimes you need your prey to run straight at you. The bait had to be loud, not in sound, but in effect. If I just kept bleeding them quietly, they'd hunker down, get cautious. I needed them moving, thinking they could chase me into a kill box. So I went for their throat, the relay hub on Ridgepoint Spur. It wasn't their main headquarters, but it was the nerve cluster, the place their outlying posts called in from, where their patrol routes got updated, where their jammers synced. Shut it down, and they'd be a half-blind giant, stumbling around in the fog. It took me most of the afternoon to ghost my way there. The fog was rolling back in, thick and silver, which worked in my favor. I skirted their lookouts, counted their rotations. Every 37 minutes, 2 of them would walk a lazy loop to the far side of the ridge, out of line of sight of the door. That gave me about 90 seconds of open lane. I was inside before their next lap. The hub was a repurposed mining shack, walls braced with fresh lumber, cables running like veins into a cluster of hardware stacked on a table. I'd expected to have to smash it all. Instead, I opened it like a jeweler taking apart a watch, severed a few specific lines, pulled a crucial board, and left the rest humming uselessly. The beauty of it? They wouldn't even know it was dead until the next time they tried to route a call. But I didn't stop there. I left them a gift. On the workbench, I laid out a compass from my old kit, its brass case scuffed and blackened from years of abuse. Next to it, a single 9mm round. No note, no mark, just those two things. Anyone who'd served with night glass would know exactly what it meant. I've found you, and I'm still moving. By the time the patrol came back around, I was gone. From my perch a mile away, I watched the confusion ripple, men running in and out, voices rising over the wind. One of them held up the compass, shouting at the others like it was a snake he'd found under his bed. Perfect. It didn't take long for them to do exactly what I wanted. They pushed a big response team toward my false trail in the east. Half their manpower, chasing a ghost. I'd already looped west. That's where I found their mid-ridge patrol, 6 of them clustered around a fire they weren't supposed to have lit. They were relaxed, laughing, not expecting company. I dropped 3 before the other 3 even stood up. Clean, quiet. Left their radios alive long enough to transmit a few seconds of panic back to base before I killed them, too. By midnight, the Separatists had pulled back from half their forward positions to tighten their perimeter around the hub. That meant every survivor I'd stashed was now behind their shrinking line, and safer than they'd been since the ambush. Colonel Pratt must have seen the pattern forming on his monitors. If I had to guess, that's when he told his crew, "She's dismantling them, piece by piece." He'd be right, but I wasn't done pulling teeth yet. By the third night, their perimeter was a mess. Holes punched through it where I'd taken out posts, weak seams where they'd pulled men to plug other leaks. It was like watching a bad poker player try to bluff with a hand that keeps getting smaller. That's when I found the thread. I'd been tracking a courier, young guy, light on his feet, always carrying a canvas satchel handcuffed to his wrist. He didn't fit with the rest. Too clean, too well fed. His boots were dry even when the rest of them slogged through slush. So I tailed him. Not close enough to spook him, just close enough to mark his route. He didn't head to the main hub. He went past it, weaving through a narrow defile in the ridge that looked like nothing on a map. 10 minutes later, he vanished into what I thought was a snow drift, until I saw the faint shimmer of canvas under the frost. Camouflage netting, covering the mouth of a cave. I stayed in the rocks until he came back out, lighter satchel now, moving quick. That told me one thing. Whatever was in there, it wasn't just their sleeping quarters. It was important. I looped around the ridge, found a higher entry point, and belly crawled to the lip until I could peer down. Inside the cavern, light glowed off metal racks and comms gear. A map table sat dead center, dotted with markers. 2 figures stood over it, one in a patched camo jacket, one in a black field coat that practically screamed "Commander." The man in the black coat was the spider, the one running the web. I marked every detail I could, their positions, the racks, the satchel drop spot, even the way the ventilation ducts ran overhead. That last part mattered because a bad duct means a thin wall, and a thin wall means I could put a round through it if I needed to. Before I pulled back, I planted one more breadcrumb. I left a small scrap of cloth snagged on the netting, deep green canvas from my own pack, the kind only issued to special recon kits. It was a quiet signature, meant for one audience only, Colonel Pratt. If they found it, they'd know I was looking right at the target. That night, I went back to one of my hide sites, checked on the survivors, and told Drew, my note-taker, that we were almost done. His eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since we pulled him from the ice. Almost done didn't mean safe. It meant the next move was going to be loud, because now I knew exactly where to put the knife. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was restless, because I wanted every detail of that cave burned into my brain. Angles, distances, shadows, where the sentries stood, how the wind shifted at the mouth every few minutes when the temperature dropped. By the time the horizon grayed, I knew how I was going to do it. The trick to taking out a command node isn't firepower, it's timing. You want to hit them when they're fat and sure of themselves. Morning, during their first hot coffee, when their boots are off and their shoulders are unstrung. I moved before dawn, using the same ridge route I tailed the courier on. The fog was thick again, clinging to the rock like wet cloth. I could smell the wood smoke from their heaters before I saw the netting. One guard out front. He never saw me. I pulled him down behind the rocks, stripped his headset, and listened in. Chatter about rations. A joke about the weather. Not a hint of alarm. Perfect. I cut through the netting low, just enough to slip under. Inside, the cavern felt smaller than it looked from above. Stacks of crates along the walls. the map table dead center. The black-coat commander leaned over it with two lieutenants, arguing in clipped sentences. I took the first lieutenant with a suppressed double tap. The second spun toward me, got as far as "what the" before I put him down. The commander froze. His eyes flicked to the pistol in my hand, then to the door behind me, calculating. "Don't," I told him. He didn't. Instead, he asked the one question they all do when the tide turns. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. Just stepped forward, yanked the satchel off the table, and swept the map markers into my pack. Then I put one round through the comms rack and two into the ventilation duct above, dropping a spill of cold air and dust into the room. That would read like chaos on their remaining sensors, enough to make them think they'd been hit by more than one intruder. The commander tried to talk again, so I gave him my answer. One round to the temple. Clean. Quiet. Done. By the time the fog lifted outside, the heart of their operation was bleeding out on the cave floor. I left the satchel and intel markers where Pratt's recovery team could find them, along with one last breadcrumb, my old Ghosthawk patch, pinned to the map table with a combat knife. From my position upridge, I watched the separatists discover the bodies. They swarmed like hornets, but the sting was gone from them. Their orders weren't coming anymore. Their spine was broken. The rest of the hunt was inevitable. I didn't linger at the cave. Once the head's off the snake, the body thrashes, and I didn't need to be there when it started. I cut back across the ridges, hitting my hide sights in a wide loop. At each one, I pulled my people out. No speeches, no explanations, just a nod, a shove of a ration pack into their hands, and the same two words. Stay low. Drew was the last. His leg had stiffened up, but his eyes were sharper now. I pressed a folded scrap of paper into his palm, a grid coordinate, and two sentences. Follow this line until you see the flag. Wait for them. Don't move. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and tucked it away like it was a winning lottery ticket. The spot I sent them to was a natural shelter, a rock dome tucked into a gully, invisible from above, with a water seep in the back and enough space for all five to lie down without being seen. I'd left a cache there earlier, medkits, a field stove, and every last scrap of food I'd lifted from enemy stores. It wasn't luxury. It was survival. On the boulder outside the gully, I scratched a mark in charcoal, the old Nightglass rally symbol. Not for them. For whoever Pratt sent in behind me. Then I turned away. I didn't want to be there when the recovery team came. If they saw me, they'd try to pull me out. And I wasn't ready to be pulled. 2 hours later, I was high on the western ridge when I spotted movement in the valley. Figures in winter camo, moving in staggered file. Not separatists. Their pace was too disciplined, their spacing too precise. Pratt's people. I watched them find the mark, watched their lead man vanish into the gully. 10 minutes later, I saw the signal flare pop. They had my people. That should have been my cue to head home. Instead, I pulled my pack tighter and kept moving east. Because for me, the mission wasn't done. Not yet. Most folks think once the main target's down, the fight's over. That's the kind of thinking that gets people killed later. Cut off the head, and you still have a body full of reflex and teeth. And I'd seen too many ops where the survivors of a broken force just melted into the hills, only to reappear a month later with rifles and a score to settle. Not on my watch. The separatists still had weapons caches scattered through the peaks. I knew because I'd followed their resupply runs. They had at least 3 fallback positions, all rigged to hole up and hold out. And they still had runners, fast, wiry little shadows who could slip through the cordon before Pratt's recovery team even knew they were gone. I went after all of them. The first cache I found was tucked in a shallow cave, crates stacked like building blocks. I didn't blow it, too much noise. I stripped the firing pins from every rifle, cracked open the ammo crates, and dumped them into the meltwater stream trickling out the cave mouth. Then I packed the pins into a pouch and pitched them into a crevasse a mile away. The fallback positions went the same way. I ghosted in, found their weak points, and made them unusable. One I burned outright, couldn't risk it being reclaimed. The smoke curled into the morning sky like a signal flare to no one in particular. This place is done. The runners took more work. I tailed one for nearly 2 hours before I found the little hollow where they were staging. 4 of them. The leader was a woman, probably ex-military herself, judging by the way she kept scanning the tree line even while the others were resting. I respected her enough to make it clean. One shot, low wind, center mass. The others panicked, bolted straight into my line of fire. By the time their bodies stopped moving, the echo had already been swallowed by the mountains. By the third day, the board was nearly empty. The last patrol I ran into didn't even fight. They tossed their rifles in the snow and put their hands up. I left them for Pratt's people. I wasn't here to collect prisoners. Every step of it felt inevitable, not thrilling, not even satisfying, just work that needed doing. And when I finally stood on that last ridge, looking down at a valley where the only movement was wind in the pines, I knew I'd done it. Black Spire was clear, but I also knew something else. I'd just taken away the only reason I'd had to keep moving. I hit the gate at 0500, 3 days after they'd declared the mission lost. The sentry on duty had that early shift glaze in his eyes, the kind you get staring at frost-rimmed wire for hours with nothing moving but the wind. He didn't recognize me at first. I probably wouldn't have, either. My jacket was torn, caked in grime and worse. My boots looked like they'd been chewed by the mountain itself. My hair was still twisted into its same tight knot, but it was matted with sweat, blood, and snow melt. Slung over my shoulder was a flag, Bravo 2's colors, that I'd cut down from the enemy's ridgepole. Identification? He asked out of habit. I looked him square in the face. Ghosthawk, delivering Bravo 2's colors. The color drained from his cheeks as it hit him who I was. Ma'am, you're alive. I just nodded and stepped past him, heading for the medical wing. No speeches, no stories, no slowing down for the stares or the whispers. Inside, I laid the flag on the front desk. 5 soldiers, grid 847 North. They're under recovery care now. The nurse on duty opened her mouth to ask questions, but I was already lowering myself into a chair in the waiting area. I meant to sit for a minute. Instead, I closed my eyes, the first time in 72 hours I'd let them stay closed, and drifted. When Colonel Pratt came in 10 minutes later, I was still upright in the chair, still in perfect posture, but asleep. By the end of the day, word had spread. Ghosthawk had come home. The mission was complete. Pratt pushed through the paperwork for an honorable discharge, plus a commendation in intelligence operations, first in nearly a decade. But I didn't stick around for the ceremony. The medics cleared me for dehydration, frostbite, and a handful of minor injuries, and before dawn I was gone. No forwarding address, no press, no reunion photos. A week later, I heard they'd put Bravo 2's flag in the base memorial hall. Next to it, a plain plaque. No one left behind. Someone, probably Drew, had scratched Protocol GH7 into the corner. Pratt's crew codified my fieldwork into doctrine. It became required reading for anyone training in survival ops behind hostile lines. They taught it as Ghosthawk Protocol, a blueprint for when you're cut off, outnumbered, and the map says you're done. The first lesson was always the same. A mission doesn't end when the radios go dark. It ends when the last soul stops moving forward. 5 years later, they put a stone at the Nightglass training grounds. No names, no dates, just 7 words. They believed someone was still worth saving. I stood in front of it once alone. Didn't touch it. Didn't need to. Because I already knew what it meant. And I knew that if it ever came to it again, if the fog rolled in, the comms went dead, and someone was still out there, I'd go. No hesitation. No applause needed. Just the same quiet vow I've carried since the day my first team went down. As long as even one person doesn't quit, the mission continues.